I thought I would talk you through how I do a walking meditation, my actual process. And this is the Not So Big Woods at Norton Priory, and it's looked after by the Woodland Trust. And if you look around, despite it being the time of year it is, there are several evergreen species here, which is so important to our wildlife. It will encourage foxes, badgers and hedgehogs, just to name a few, into the area. With a walking meditation, I tend to simply begin with a breathing exercise, focusing on breathing correctly and focusing on counting those breaths. And when I feel ready, I slowly move through the woodland, waiting until a particular tree calls to me, and that's just an example. It may even be a plant. I will then sit in its space and I will meditate, but obviously check its ID before touching and especially before consuming any plants. The videos I make are for entertainment and information purposes only. And this is maple, field maple, and it's an Acer species. And in mythology, the maple represents peace and serenity, balance, intelligence, strength, endurance, and was associated with Ares, the Greek god, and also Phobos. Spiritually, it is said to represent interconnectedness, the connection between the earthly and spiritual realms. So it's actually quite funny that this one called to me today, and it genuinely looks like it's looking straight at me. The Celts actually believed maples were the ancestors of humans. In European folklore, they would hang maple branches above doorways to keep bats away. But field maple isn't where maple syrup comes from, so don't be trying to tap this one, unfortunately, guys. It's the sugar maple that you want for that. But maple leaves were actually used as protective talismans in English folklore too. It's another tree that has associations with water, and its planets are supposedly the moon and Jupiter, and it has a feminine nature about it too. And maple is more of a spiritual plant. It doesn't really tend to be used medicinally, more spiritually. And I spent about 10-15 minutes sitting at the base of that maple, connecting with it. As I continue to move through the woodland, you can also see signs of the wheel turning and Imbolc creeping closer everywhere. You can smell it in the soil. And smell is such an important sense that we want to incorporate into our walking meditations. We really want to ignite all those senses. And notice how nature in this environment is not growing in neat little lines and rows. It looks like chaos with various plant species all actually supporting one another, exchanging nutrients and messages via the soil. And in a mindful meditative walk, I may take some time to reflect on that too. I don't tend to set a time scale, and I also don't rush my meditation. When I am sat beside a tree or a plant that pulls me to it, I don't actually want to rush that moment, that process. I tend to find you know exactly when the right moment to disconnect is, and you will naturally do so. So the days are slowly starting to increase in length in anticipation of Imbolc, when we celebrate the returning of the light. And other signs apart from the plants that I'm showing you now are actually in this woodland. There's loads of species of woodpecker. The sound of nature, birds tweeting, the woodpeckers repeatedly striking the side of trees. All that sound is something that can be worked with to enhance your meditative experience. As I said before, it's about invoking all of our senses. From touch, sound, smell, sight, we want to invoke them all. And hopefully some of the metaphysical, spiritual ones too. Sadly, I didn't manage to capture any of the woodpeckers today. I would have liked to. One of my favourite birds. And you may feel a little silly doing this at first, but other people will just see you walking along, admiring nature, admiring the animals, enjoying your walk, and just being out there, healthy. It doesn't have to be made overtly obvious to the passerby. And most of them would just consider it that you just sat there resting after a bit of a walk. Whether you're next to a beautiful tree, a stream, or some flowers. You may well likely even pass others doing just that themselves. Nature itself and just being in nature can be so therapeutic. It is stated that just 15 minutes can lower the stress hormone significantly. And you can also do this as a family too. It's about being present in the moment, slowing down and going inward. And I do turn the camera off whilst I meditate, but I'm happy to show you all the walking bits in between. And if you manage to be out in nature at sunset or sunrise, that is actually a wonderful way of sending those crucial, important signals to your brain and resetting that circadian rhythm. Obviously, it doesn't happen after just one trip out there. This is repeated exposure to the natural light of the planet in line with the seasons, and that is what helps our circadian rhythm to fall into balance easier. I spent a little bit of time here looking at this on my way back, to be honest. Absolutely beautiful. And I envision with every step that each step takes me further inward, further into my own psyche. My outward steps reflect the inner journey of my mind and my subconscious, and that connection that I'm trying to make between the two. And this is silver birch, Betula pendula, the lady of the woods, also associated with the element of water and very popular around the British Isles. And as you can see, the branches and the trunk develop this thin white covering of fresh bark, and it peels off in strips. And this outer bark and the inner bark are actually used in many medicinal remedies. I personally make a birch tar soap for my hidradenitis, for example. But this is one of the first trees that actually shows the sign of spring. And the sap is usually foraged in spring, but I buy mine in from reputable sources. And it's not just the sap or the bark that is used. You can also work with the leaves medicinally too. As a medicine, birch is amazing for wound healing, or so it's stated. And it contains an aspirin-like compound, which is believed to be good for arthritis and joint pain due to its anti-inflammatory properties. It's also a really powerful diuretic, so good for UTIs. And it's rich in flavonoids and is a popular ingredient in cosmetics too. And the chaga mushroom actually also grows on this beautiful tree. And spiritually, it's associated with purification and protection. Maypoles were also traditionally made from birch, and the twigs were used to light the Beltane fires. And there's also a folklore link with fertility in the past too, said to represent new beginnings and the start of summer and the end of winter. Any questions, please pop them in the comments and I will get back to you. I'm not an expert on this, obviously. These are just some techniques, tips and tricks that have worked for me.